Thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming. You have been indoctrinated into Facebook by eating too much and in a food coma, so welcome to Facebook. So I'm Prashant. I'm a developer advocate with Facebook out in Menlo Park. And in this session, we're going to talk about adding social features to your iOS app. Now, about a year ago, I was in your shoes. I was pretty much exactly like you. I was an app developer. I had an app in the App Store, and I had to figure out a way to get that app discovered. And as Doug was alluding to earlier this morning, that's actually a very difficult problem. There are over 700,000 apps in the iOS App Store. There are over 700,000 apps in the Android and Google Play. You can bet in the next couple of weeks, as they have their conferences out in San Francisco, those numbers will increase pretty dramatically as well. So the challenge is pretty significant. You've got a great app. You've got an awesome app. You've figured out who your customer is. You've built something really cool. You've hired a bunch of developers and so on. And now you got to get discovered and get noticed. So in this session, I'm going to show you a lot of the tools that will help your app get noticed. Now again, a year ago, I was in your shoes. I was an app developer. And I look at a lot of the tools that we have at Facebook now, and I kind of chuckle when I'm in meetings, especially with mobile app install ads. When I'm in a meeting with the mobile app install ads team, I start laughing to myself, because if I had that feature a year ago, things would have been very different for my app. Being able to juice your initial app installs is pretty significant. And being able to get your initial set of users very quickly and with a few lines of code is incredibly, incredibly simple and incredibly powerful. What I'm going to talk about in this session, and Christine Liu is going to dive into mobile app install ads later today, and it's definitely something to check out. It gets you your initial set of users. What I'm going to talk about here is how you start driving growth or distribution and discovery of your app using organic tools that are built into Facebook, using the apps, using the users that you already have on your app. And I'm going to talk about that specifically with the iOS SDK. So you can get the iOS SDK from developers.facebook.com/iOS. The iOS SDK version 3.5 is available right now for download. And it's also every single person who's attending Mobile DevCon today has access to that. You're one of the few people in the world that has access to a lot of the native share dialogue features inside of the iOS SDK. So download it, check it out. I'm going to show you how to use that in this session. After me, Christine Abernathy is going to be on stage, and she's going to dive into things like the Object API and using Open Graph. So between the two of us, we will cover a lot of the things that Eddie had spoken about from a code perspective. So the question is, why should you use the Facebook SDK? So some of you, we know in this room, about half of you, I think, in this room, already use it. In this case, this session is going to be really an explanation of what's changed in iOS SDK 3.5. And there are a few subtle changes and a few big changes that I'll highlight. But for everyone, the Facebook SDK really enables you to help your users more easily discover your apps. Using a lot of the features in the Facebook SDK, you can publish great stories, you can get visible inside people's news feeds and inside people's timelines, and as a result, people will discover your app organically. It's the best kind of growth, right? You have a lot of users who are using your app, they're basically endorsing your app in the process of using it, and their friends see that endorsement, and when they see that endorsement, they decide they're going to download the app and use it as well. Again, the absolute best kind of growth. The Facebook SDK also provides features that enable you to personalize your app using Facebook data. When I use an app and I log in with Facebook and I want to bring my identity with me to my app. My identity is all about, things I post on Facebook are all about snowboarding, all about the Redskins, all about CrossFit, all about the things that I love, the books I read, the music I love, etc. I want to be able to share those stories through my apps as well, and I want to bring that data with me when I start using the app, using a new app. And then lastly, in the process of sharing stuff about myself through the apps I use, I can drive re-engagement. I can encourage my friends who are also using the app, when they see stories on my timeline, I can encourage them to come back to the app and use it as well. So the Facebook SDK really enables you to get greater discovery of your apps in an organic sense, personalize your app for the user, and drive re-engagement as well. So the Facebook SDK for iOS consists of three major kinds of components. The first one is what we call the core set of components. These are the things that help you manage your session and your network interaction with Facebook. It's sort of the foundation of a lot of the SDK. We then encapsulate a lot of the things that are Facebook objects, graph objects, open graph actions, and then things like the user, places, and so forth. So you have really easy, fast access to a lot of the data that's inside of Facebook. And we also encapsulate a lot of the native user interfaces, things like a login button and a profile picture. I'm not going to really talk about it in this session, but we also provide a friend picker and a place picker as well, so that you can very easily incorporate a lot of the functionality that's in Facebook, whether it's login or finding people's friends or finding places nearby. You can incorporate a lot of that functionality into your app as well. So getting started with the Facebook SDK is really simple. All you have to do is go to developers.facebook.com and create a new Facebook app. It's really pretty straightforward. I'll walk you through that in screenshots in a second. You add the Facebook SDK to your Xcode project, and then you configure Xcode to implement your project on Facebook. At that point, your app can start sharing, it can implement Facebook login, it can publish to the Facebook Open Graph. Really, really straightforward. So again, you start by going to the app creation screen on developers.facebook.com/apps. You click on Create a New App, and you're up here at this screen where you can configure your app. So I've got one here for social boarding or social snowboarding. It's got an app ID, which we'll take note of as well. And I can specify information, for example, the display name on Facebook. So how this app is referred to on Facebook can also be configured here. This app will be referred to as social boarding on Facebook. I then specified that I want to support native iOS from within this app. And so I supply the bundle ID that will be used inside of Xcode. I enable Facebook login, I enable deep linking, two things I'll talk about later on as well. And then inside of Xcode, and for those of you who are upgrading from an older version of the SDK, there are a couple things that are different here. The first thing is you'll incorporate all the frameworks that are necessary, including the Facebook SDK itself, on the left-hand side of the screen. And for those of you who are upgrading, you also have to incorporate now the security framework as well. That's a little bit different. And then you add a few plist entries to your plist file, URL types, the Facebook app ID, which we took note of earlier. And then for those of you who are upgrading, we also have a new plist entry called Facebook display name, which corresponds to the display name on my app creation screen. And so now at this point, you're basically ready to create an Xcode application or create an iOS application that integrates with Facebook. So this is basically all the configuration steps that you do just once per app. And at that point, you're ready to start sharing. So the question is, why does sharing matter? Well, sharing is central to our online experience. You know, when we surf the web today, when we see an article from The Onion, what do? We post it. When we see a new comic strip from The Oatmeal, what do? We post it. When we see a news article we love, we post it. When we see a video of a cat or whatever, it's really funny, we post that as well. It's how we share things that we find online with our friends. It's how we kind of establish our identity. You know, my Facebook timeline's pretty comical, particularly around football season, where I'm trash talking with everybody. And everybody's got a different thing. You know, I've got friends who post cat pictures all the time, and it's, you know, quite amusing. But sharing is, in a lot of ways, it encapsulates our identity online. It tells people these are the things I'm interested in, and it helps people start a conversation with you. And it turns out, of course, you know, with over 1 billion users every month, it turns out that's a pretty popular thing to do in the world. But sharing is also an expectation that we have in the apps that we use. You know, if you are a music lover and you use a music app, you want to share with your friends the music that you're listening to. And in fact, you know, I'm personally someone who could not tell the difference between Justin Bieber or anything else. I'm not really into music, but I love watching Simon and Connor's music feed from Spotify and Rdio, because I can discover new music and new things that are interesting to listen to. So it works both ways. When you share stuff about your music that you love, your friends can see that and engage with that as well. And it turns that app into something that is very much a shared experience. Now, I'm an avid CrossFitter, and so one of the things that CrossFitters love to do is they love to keep track of all their records. They love to keep track of how much they squatted, how much they benched, et cetera, and they can track their progress over time. So the other day, I downloaded, because I do this right now in Evernote, and it's kind of clunky, I downloaded an app from the App Store that's all about CrossFit. It's the #1 CrossFit app in the App Store. So I downloaded this thing, and I started entering all my workouts, and I started entering my progress inside of this particular app. Now, it turns out that this app does not allow any form of sharing at all. And I'll talk about different forms of sharing in a moment. But it doesn't offer any form of sharing at all. And so one thing CrossFitters love to do is they love to compare themselves with other people, their friends and people that are in the same kind of cohort as they are, age group, how long they've been CrossFitting, and so on. And there's nothing in this app that lets me compare my progress with folks that are like me. And there's nothing in this app that enables me to share my progress with my friends. And it turns out, you know, a fitness journey, everyone's got sort of their own journeys and different hobbies, but a lot of people have their own personal fitness journey. That's something that is something that people really love to share. Because it turns out when you share stories about how much you run, how much you lift, how much you do from a fitness perspective, not only do you feel good about doing that, but the encouragement you get from your friends is also self-fulfilling. So it turns out that's a big thing that a lot of folks love to do as well. And in this app, there was nothing in this app that enabled me to share. So what happened? Well, after a week of using the app, I lost interest in it, and I stopped using it. There was no social proof in the app. There was nothing in the app that my friends encouraged me to come back to use it. There was nothing about the app that made me want to come back and re-engage with it. And so the lesson there is that when you start designing apps, putting people at the center of your apps is critical. And enabling people to share from your app is also equally as important. So let's talk about sharing. In iOS 6, Apple and Facebook worked together to include what we call a simple share sheet inside that's baked into the operating system. And so this is the simplest form of sharing that you can do from within your app. Within your app, with one line of code, doesn't require Facebook login at all, with one line of code, you can invoke the share sheet. And the share sheet can then be customized by the user, and they can specify what friends they want to share that out with, and if they want to tag a location or whatever, they can do that as well. The absolute simplest form of sharing, one line of code, incredibly simple. Today, with the iOS SDK 3.5, and as Eddie spoke about earlier, we are offering a better form of sharing. With this, it also doesn't require Facebook login. With this, you use the Facebook app that's already installed on pretty much every phone, every iOS phone on the planet. And so with this, we simply fast app switch you to the native Facebook app. We pre-populate the link and everything else, and it looks really pretty. It looks like the story that's going to show up on Facebook. And it gives the user something that is very elegant and very beautiful to look at, and they can engage with it, they can add their friends, they can tag additional things inside that text field. And it looks and behaves just like Facebook, because, in fact, it is the Facebook app. And then when you're done sharing, we bring you right back to your original app. So I'm going to cover these two forms of sharing in this session. And this is the good version and the better version. The best form of sharing is the Facebook Open Graph. And with Facebook Open Graph, you can enable a user to share. You don't have to use a dialog box that you didn't design. You don't have to use the Facebook app. You can create your own user experience. You can create your own actions and objects. And you can create a much richer and a much more engaging story that shows up in people's timelines. And so as Eddie talked about earlier, and as Christine will talk about in the session after me, we've made this a lot easier for mobile developers beginning today. And that's definitely something that you're going to want to stick around and watch Christine's session as well. So the simple share sheet, like I promised, one line of code. For those of you who are upgrading to the SDK 3.5, this is slightly different. You can see that we've got a new class here called FB Dialogues. This encapsulates all of the dialogues that we will have in the Facebook SDK. Inside that FB Dialogues class, we've got obviously a new method called Present OS Integrated Share Dialog Modal. And inside this method, you specify the various parameters so that you can see the result of that share sheet on the screen here. Again, the absolute simplest form of sharing, incredibly simple to do, one line of code. So let's take a look at what that looks like on the demo machine. And just give me a second to log in. OK. So if we look down here, I've got, let me just run the application so you can see what it looks like. And forgive me, the application isn't particularly beautiful. It's just purely for demo purposes. But it's elegant, we can put it that way, minimalist. And so we've got a share button on the screen. And when I press that share button, I'm going to invoke the share button pressed method inside my view controller. And so in the view controller, again, I am calling the FB Dialogues class. I am presenting an OS integrated. I'm calling this particular method. One thing I should talk about here is the initial text parameter. You are not allowed to pre-populate the text in any of our dialogues. We supply this parameter in case you provide a text field or some other form of input for the user inside your app. But this is one of the most common policy violations we see, is people pre-populating the text field. So what I would really have to do is have a text field inside my app, enable the user to enter some information, and then I can pass it to the dialog box. So keep that in mind as you build your apps. So you can see here I'm going to invoke the share sheet, and we'll just go ahead and call share. And so up pops a dialog box. I'm a Redskin fan, I apologize. And in here, I've got an article here about RG3's miraculous recovery, and I'll go ahead and post that to my wall. When we go back and check my wall later, we'll see if any of my friends trash talk with me. So incredibly simple, one line of code, very easy to invoke the share sheet, very easy to share information, data, whatever from within your app. So let's go back to Keynote, please. So beginning today with the iOS SDK 3.5, we are offering a better sharing mechanism. Again, this uses the Facebook app. No Facebook login is required at all to use this. And it performs what we call explicit sharing to the timeline, meaning that just like the share sheet, the user gets to see what's going to show up on their Facebook wall before they actually post it. And so that's, for some people, that's incredibly valuable, and for some app scenarios, that's also incredibly valuable. They can also tag friends and places. And we also, from this dialog box, support app attribution, meaning that rather than showing up on my timeline as a post via iOS, which we'll see in a moment, is the result of the share sheet, instead, it'll say this is from or via the app that I have installed, in this case, social boarding. So the result here is a lot more engaging stories with a lot less development effort. You can create a story that attributes right back to your app, that performs a lot of the stuff you would see in the simple share sheet. It looks more beautiful. This is something that we will improve upon over time, make it even more attractive for users. And what they're really seeing is what the story is going to look like on their wall or on their timeline before they post it. And that's incredibly valuable. It really will encourage people to post more and to complete the post action. And so here's what it looks like. Again, one line of code. I supply the URL or the data that I want to post to the share sheet or to the native share dialog, and then I can invoke it. And then you can see, again, the result of that is something that looks like what it's going to look like on Facebook. I can also, from here, configure Open Graph actions and objects. And so using the same native share dialog, I can specify or configure the object that I want to post. In this case, I'm hiking a trail. For example, and I can specify information about the trail. It's one of my favorite hikes up in Whistler, which is my home mountain. And then I can specify the place I'm going to tag it. That happens to be the Facebook ID for Whistler Mountain, as well as information about the action that I'm actually going to post. In this case, the action is going to be a hike action, as you can see here at the bottom. I'm not going to cover this in much detail, but Christine Abernathy in the session immediately after me will go into a lot more detail about Open Graph in this particular dialog box. So let's see so the result of all of these forms of sharing is really beautiful stories that show up on timeline and in newsfeed. And the result of beautiful stories is a lot better engagement. People will see these stories, they'll be intrigued by them, they'll be interested by them, and as a result, they will click on them. And if you have everything configured right with deep linking and so forth, which we'll talk about in a moment, what will happen when they click on it is they will discover your app. So from your app, you're enabling people to tell the stories of their life. And as a result, they're publishing beautiful stories to their timelines, which their friends will see, and they will eventually discover your app as a result. So let's take a look at this in action. We go to the demo monitor, please. And so I've got my Git project here set up to automatically switch to that branch. Perfect. And once again, I'll run it so you can take a look at my beautiful app. And so I've added two buttons to the bottom. The first one is the native sharing button, and then, of course, the native sharing with Open Graph button. When I click on the native sharing or tap on the native sharing button, I will invoke the FB Dialogues class. Again, I will supply some information there. One thing that's interesting is in this beta period, we require you to explicitly enable in your code a beta feature. What this means is, or what this functions as, is that your code will only work in debug mode. So effectively, what this means is you can't deploy apps with this SDK, with the beta SDK installed. But it is available in this beta period for you to start playing with and start using. So this line of code will eventually go away, but for now, you will actually need to use it. And so again, I'll invoke the FB Dialogues class, so let's go ahead and do that in the simulator. And then I'll just go ahead and say I have Bieber fever and post that. And then finally, the native OG share button pressed. Again, I'm not going to go into much detail about this. The first thing I will do is configure my object. Then I'll tag any places, locations, whatever that I want to add to this particular story. I'll configure the action, and then I'll go ahead and present the dialog box with the action and the object configured completely and available for the user to approve and post. So really briefly, let's go to my Facebook, and you never know what's going to show up on my Facebook and how many people have commented, but we will, it's the beauty of live demos using Facebook. And so what I've got here, you can see here is the first story I published about RG3. You can see I've posted that 5 minutes ago via iOS. So there's nothing there that tells me that I posted it from my particular app. It's a beautiful story. It's a photo. It's quite intriguing. There's a link associated with it, and that's pretty cool. And then over here, I've got Bieber Fever. And you can see here I've shared a link via social boarding. If I was on my mobile phone and I were to tap on that, I would end up going to the social boarding app that you just saw as well. So it's a much more engaging story, a much more beautiful story as a result. So if we could go back to Keynote, please. Perfect. OK. So the next thing that's kind of important, will kind of close the loop around discovery, is deep linking. So we've talked so far about enabling people to share really cool stories from your app, the stories of their life, right? So I'm sharing that I, have a man crush on RG3, or that I love Justin Bieber, or I've gone on a 5-mile run, or I've read a certain book, or I've listened to music. I've shared these really engaging, interesting stories about me via your apps. The next thing you have to do is when people see those beautiful, engaging stories, you need to close the loop so that when they tap on them, when they interact with them, they come to your app. And that's a feature we call deep linking. So the first thing is users will see the stories that are generated by your app. And then what will happen is when they engage with those stories, we'll take them directly to the app if it's already installed on their device. So if I'm playing Candy Crush Saga, for example, and I see that my friend Elizabeth just scored level 20, I'm going to think to myself, well, I can beat that. So I'm going to tap on that story. I'm going to end up in Candy Crush Saga because I am an addicted Candy Crush Saga player. I'm actually not, but you get the picture. But if I didn't have the app installed, we would take them directly to the App Store or Google Play to download it and install it. So what we have here is sort of closing that loop around sharing. You're building an awesome app that's really engaging for the types of customers you're looking for. You're enabling them to share the stories of their life through your app. Their friends see those stories, and when they interact with them, they are taken directly to your app. And now you've created that organic growth, that organic discovery mechanism that is essential for massive growth in the modern mobile era. Now, deep linking works best when you're parsing the incoming link. So if I see a picture that Horatio is my best friend, posted to a board on Pinterest, and I interact with it, I don't want to just show up in the front page of Pinterest. I want to show up at that board so I can see what exactly Horatio thinks is really awesome right now on Pinterest. And if he doesn't have it installed on his device, I'm going to be taken to the App Store where I can download Pinterest. So what you've got here is really engaging stories that entice people to interact with them, that encourage them to download and use your app. And once they download and use your app, they're taken directly to that spot where they can continue that engagement. They can interact with Horatio, who really loves whatever it is, this recipe that he just posted. Now, for those of you who are upgrading from an older version of the SDK, this is a little bit different. In the past, you would have to, in the open URL method in your app delegate, you would have to parse that incoming URL. And it wasn't particularly hard. I mean, it's not a difficult thing to do. It's just annoying. And you would have to parse it. So you'd have to parse that and then look for the target URL inside the URL that you got. Then you'd have to parse that as well. Well, we've done away with that. Using the FB app call class, you can drill into that call object and find the target URL property inside there to parse that information as well. So rather than parsing a string, a giant URL string, now you can access a direct property. Awesome. Much easier to make you a lot more productive, and you can get back to the business of building an awesome app. OK, so far we've talked about a lot of things. enabling people to share from your app, enabling deep linking so that when people see those stories, they come back to your app, creating that organic discovery mechanism. We haven't talked about Facebook login at all. And in fact, nothing I've shown you so far requires you to support Facebook login. So the question becomes, why should you use Facebook login at all? And we like to say colloquially inside of Facebook that Facebook login is your gateway to awesome stuff. We use a little bit different language, but it lets you access the user's identity. So who are they? What do they like? What languages do they speak? It lets you access everything that a user has entered inside their profile. It also lets you access their friends. So who are they friends with? So if you're building a game, you want to build a friend selector so people can challenge their friends. If you're building a social app that's mobile, you want to let them find out who else of their friends uses your app. And it's a great way to be able to do that once you have the user's login credentials. You'll appear in search if you're a game and you have a Canvas app. And it's much easier to build integrated Open Graph applications, the kind of things that Christine will talk about in the session after me. So supporting Facebook login is really, really simple. You add 2 lines of code to your view-did-load method, and then you implement the FB login view delegate. And that's all you have to do. It's 4 methods that you have to implement in your view controller. Now we have 2 forms of Facebook login dialogues. We have the one that's built into iOS 6 and above, and it has a native iOS look and feel. And then beginning today, we have a better version of the Facebook login that leverages the latest Facebook app, and it provides a more informative experience for users when they're going to authenticate their application. They can see both application icons. It's a lot prettier and a lot more engaging. I'm going to show you that first one now, so we can switch to the demo machine, please. And let me just switch over to that guy. So again, inside my view controller, actually let me just run the app real quick, and you'll see that I've got the FB login view class inside my view controller. I've got the FB profile picture view as well inside my view controller. When I click on the login, I'm going to go to the FB login view delegate, which you see right here, and I've implemented 4 classes, the error handler, and then this class is called once you have information about the user. And so I fetch the user, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab their first name and then their profile ID, and then I'm going to populate the view controller with that information. So we'll just go ahead and log in here, and I'll say OK. And you can see we've fetched my profile photo from Facebook and my first name, and we've just gone ahead and posted it to the label. So pretty easy. Again, 2 lines of code. All you have to do is add that to view-did-load, implement the delegate, and you're ready to go with Facebook login. Later today, one of my favorite companies, Parse, will be up here to talk about how to do that integrated with their login as well. So there are a lot of great partners that you'll hear about later today as well who have made it very easy to support Facebook login from a variety of different platforms and a variety of different app servers and cloud platforms as well. So Facebook login is incredibly simple to use, and it's also integrated with a lot of other tools from a lot of partners that you'll hear about later today. OK, so that's pretty straightforward. And what I'll do is I'll just shut this guy down. And if we can go back to Keynote, please. So what are some best practices for using Facebook login? We've seen a lot of apps. We've seen a lot of people do different things with Facebook login. I think the first one is make sure you're using the latest SDKs for native login. You'll end up with a much richer, much more beautiful user experience as a result. The other thing, again, a year ago I was in your shoes, and when we launched our app, we only supported Facebook login. And we saw a good number of people who converted and authenticated with our app, but it wasn't earth-shattering. So what we did is we went back and we offered both Facebook login as well as the option for email and password login, so bypassing Facebook altogether. We saw our login number skyrocket, which was pretty awesome. But the intriguing thing was that most of those folks ended up authenticating with Facebook anyway. So the lesson is, yes, you want to be able to log in with Facebook because you want to capture information about the user, but you also have to provide the user with a choice. And it turns out, sort of anecdotally, that when you do offer users that choice, they will implicitly trust your app more, and as a result, they will go ahead and authenticate with Facebook login. So it's definitely a best practice that we've learned. You have to separate read and write permissions, but we also suggest that you ask for write permissions in context. Don't just ask for read permissions and then immediately ask for write permissions. Ask for read permissions, and then at the time in your app, maybe a moment in your app when someone's going to be willing to share something, at that time, you should then ask for write permissions as well. So ask for write permissions in context with the user. The other thing we suggest is that you should explain why you need Facebook login. This is something, people just see the login with Facebook button, and then a dialog box pops up with a list of permissions that's being requested. But there's no explanation preceding that about what's going to be done with that data. So a really good best practice is to explain what you're going to do with the data that you're asking for. So now you've got data. So what can you do with it? This is what I call the empty room problem. When you show up in a room and there's nothing in the room, the first thing you're thinking is, well, what can I do with it? Can I bring my style to this room? Can I bring furniture in this room? Or you could be thinking, whose house is this and why am I here? But nevertheless, you've got an empty room problem. How will you customize this app for the person when they're first arriving inside your app? And to do that, you should access the social graph. The social graph is the connections that a person makes with their friends, the things that they like, and the things that they do in other apps. And accessing the social graph is really simple. And what you can do with it is get a really good picture of who the user is. And then as a result, you can tailor your app for the user. You can suggest friends for them to follow inside your app. You can suggest things that they can do inside your app, places they can visit, and you can even pre-populate information. In the app that I built, it was a fashion app, we looked for likes. We looked for whether a person liked certain brands, Calvin Klein, Jimmy Choo, whatever, and we pre-populated our app with information gleaned from the user's profile about things that they liked. These are all really interesting things, and in fact, it's all accessible using the Graph API. And in fact, if you've got a computer open now, you can open up a browser, go to graph.facebook.com/me, and you'll find information about yourself. And so you can get profile information about the currently logged in user by accessing /me. /me/friends will get you a list of that person's friends. We colloquially inside, thanks to Connor Tracy, we call this Call Me Maybe, and we have a little song and everything else for it. And it's all accessible using the Graph API. Now, this all comes at a cost. You have lots of power here. These are all the things that you can access about a user's profile. And it's pretty awesome. It's pretty daunting. I mean, you can get their relationship details. You can get their activities that they like. You can get the pages they like, the languages they speak, and so on. You can even get their birthday. These are all really awesome things that you can access from a profile, but it's also, kind of creepy. And as a great philosopher once said, with great power comes great responsibility. And you don't want to be the app on the right. The app on the right is asking for a whole bunch of stuff. A, it's not telling me why it wants all that stuff. And then B, what does it need? I mean, why does it need, relationship information? If it's a dating app, that makes sense. But if it's not a dating app, why does it need relationship information? So, you should ask for things that make sense. You should ask for them in context. You should prepare the user for why you're asking for their data. But you also shouldn't be creepy. Don't ask people for everything about a person's profile. Be very responsible about the information that you glean from a person's profile. The quickest way to get people to cancel out of your app and abandon your app is to ask for too many permissions on Facebook. It's weird. So we also have a tool on developers.facebook.com. If you go to the tools dropdown, you will see one of the tools is the Graph API Explorer. This is my profile. And so in my profile, for example, I filled out the languages that I speak. And I happen to speak Klingon. And you can access languages if you ask for the user likes permission. And then if you use the Graph API Explorer, you can drop down the little guy on the left-hand side, and you can look for languages. And the result is a JSON encoded object here that has information about me, so that's my Facebook ID, as well as my name, as well as the languages array that I asked for. And you can see here it matches exactly what's filled out inside my profile. So it's pretty easy to access the Facebook social graph. Again, you have to have permission first. So once a user has given you permission to like certain things and so forth, you can then go ahead and execute a result. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm getting the object for the key languages. You saw earlier as the JSON encoded result. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate over that dictionary and then look for whether or not this particular user speaks Klingon. And if this user speaks Klingon, I'm going to alter the language of my entire app to be Klingon. So it's a pretty cool way to localize your app based on a user's language preferences. So why don't we switch over really quickly to the demo machine. And what I'll do is just do that and look at the Graph API. And so again, I'm going to grab their languages for this particular user. I'm going to iterate over them. If they speak Klingon, I will alter it with the Klingon greeting for hello. There's actually no Klingon greeting for hello. Apparently, they don't do niceties like that. So that's the way it is, I guess. And so we'll go ahead and run the app. Again, I'm logged in. I gave permissions to access my likes. And so what I will do, what you can see here is I've got a greeting that's in Klingon, because I've gone to my Facebook profile and pulled information about the user and see if they speak Klingon. So incredibly simple thing to do. So why don't we go ahead and switch back to Keynote. So we have a number of resources available for you. So far what I have done today is I have talked to you about how to enable sharing from within your app. It's really, really simple. There are two options that don't require Facebook login. And then if you want to support Open Graph for richer and more engaging stories, you can stick around for Christine Abernathy's session immediately after this, where she'll talk about Facebook Open Graph. You can download the Facebook SDK 3.5 for iOS right now, today. You are one of the only people in the world that have access to all the features in the SDK. So I encourage you to download it, play around with it, give us feedback. If you've got any time and breaks, you can download it, you can build a really quick app, and then you can pepper us with questions later. We want to hear from you. Like, pretty much the entire team is here, which is awesome. You can go to our FB Samples GitHub and download all of our latest samples. We've got a sample game up there for building a gaming application, sample social applications, and so forth. My GitHub is Cool Ass Puppy. You can go up there. You can find the samples from the sample code that I did today up there as well. And you can also find some other things. A buddy of ours in London, I don't know if you guys as iOS developers have heard of App Design Vault, but a really, really cool utility, or site, I should say, where a designer in London has built a bunch of awesome, gorgeous iOS app templates to make your app just really look great. He's got apps that would, he's got templates that will make your app, make you build and help you build an awesome fitness app, an awesome social app, an awesome dating app, what have you. It's got just incredibly cool stuff on App Design Vault. He's agreed to give everybody who attends Mobile DevCon 25% off anything you buy from that store. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. Really cool resource. When I was an independent app developer, this was invaluable. It helped me get a really beautiful app off the ground to do a proof of concept before I went off and hired an awesome designer as well. So we're all here because, as Doug mentioned, we're all sort of the pale blue dot in the app landscape. There are over 700,000 apps in the iOS App Store. There are over 700,000 apps in Google Play. It is incredibly daunting and incredibly difficult to break through that din with your app. And I have lived exactly what a lot of you are living today. I lived the stress. I have gray hair. I gained a lot of weight. It was terrible. And I know how stressful it is and how hard it is to be an independent app developer and to break through that din. With the tools that we've shown you here with the Facebook SDK, you can build apps that are incredibly engaging, that enable a user to share their identity to the world, to share things about themselves to the world. And as a result, you can get a lot of awesome, just natural, organic growth from posting to Facebook timeline. And then in that initial period, when you're trying to get those initial set of users so that your viral loop is really functioning well, mobile app install ads really help you juice your App Store rankings and get that initial group of people who are going to be passionate about your app. So I encourage you to stick around to see Christine Abernathy's session immediately after this, where she will dive into details of how to use Open Graph to get better organic growth. And then see the other Christine, Christine Liu, and she will dive into details about mobile app install ads that will help you get your initial growth and get that initial viral loop going. So I want to thank you for coming. I hope you have an awesome day. And on behalf of Facebook, thank you.
All right, let's give it